Okay, so today we have the third and the final session of this module where we are looking at the topic of emptiness. So the way I have been doing this topic is in a gradual way. So we haven't yet talked about the full meaning of emptiness as it's explained in the highest school of philosophy, the Madhyamika Prasangika. We've been going through more coarse levels of selflessness or emptiness. So the terms selflessness and emptiness are pretty much interchangeable. I'm using both of them because if you're reading books about this topic, then you will encounter both of those terms, selflessness and emptiness. So if you encounter those two terms, they're more or less the same meaning. And so does everyone have a copy of this handout that we've been using all along? So in the first session I did some sort of introductory remarks about emptiness. I won't go through those again. But then the main topic of emptiness or selflessness starts on page 2 of the handout, letter F, 2 types of selflessness or emptiness. So selflessness or emptiness can be talked of in terms of persons. So there's selflessness of persons. So person, the term person doesn't only refer to human beings, like in English, I don't know, in Hebrew as well. You know, when we say a person, it's always a human being. Whereas in Buddhism, a person can be any kind of sentient being. So animals are persons, insects are persons, hungry ghosts are persons, and so on. So any being, any sentient being, even Buddhas are also persons. So a sentient being, a being with a mind, a consciousness, is a person. So that's one way of talking about selflessness or emptiness with regard to persons. You, me, all the people in this room, all the people in Israel, all the people all over the world, and again, not just people, but all the living beings. So we are all persons, and we have selflessness. Selflessness is like a quality, an attribute of each one of us, each person. So we started looking at that one. And then selflessness of phenomena. Now here, phenomena means anything that isn't a person. So all other phenomena, all other things. So tables and chairs and buildings and cars and computers and so on. Those are phenomena. So selflessness is also an attribute of phenomena. But we haven't started talking about that. We'll get to that today. But so far we've just talked about selflessness with persons. And then letter G says there's 3 levels of selflessness of persons. And these levels are in a arrangement from more coarse or rough, gross, to more subtle. And I was using this, I thought this could be a helpful way of understanding this. This is a really lovely little doll, nicely painted. So you know how these work, right? There's different levels, different layers of dolls, okay? So this is my own invention also, I want you to know. It's not something that my lamas taught me. I probably don't even know such a thing, but anyway, in my own efforts to try to understand emptiness, I thought this could be a useful analogy. So, so the basic idea is we do exist, okay? I exist, you exist, all the 7 billion human beings on this planet exist, all the other beings exist. So we do exist. That's important, because sometimes people think the meaning of emptiness is we don't exist, we're not here. So that's wrong. If you have that idea in your mind, throw it away. It's wrong. We do exist. But the problem is, how do we exist? What are we? And the question in Buddhism isn't so much who, because people often wonder that, who am I? Who is the real me? So the question in Buddhism isn't so much who, but what. What are we? How do we exist? What is a person? What is a being? What exactly is it? That's the question. So there is something that exists, that is I, that is you, that is everybody else. There is some kind of existence, but that's actually something quite subtle. So that's like the smallest doll inside, okay? The littlest one right in the middle. That's the I, the person that does exist. But then normally we don't see that. We don't see ourselves as we really are. And instead we have these layers on top of what we really are. And those layers are created by our mind, fabricated by our mind, because of misunderstanding, ignorance. We call it ignorance in Buddhism. We have various kinds of wrong ideas or misconceptions about our existence, and so we add these additional layers to what's really there. So Buddhism identifies three, there could be more, but three main layers of wrong ideas, false ideas, that we add on top of what does exist. So we started with the coarsest one. So under letter G, number 1, very coarse. Okay. So here it says, the emptiness of a permanent, unitary, and independent self. So a permanent, unitary, independent self, this is actually the kind of self that many people believed in. Is that the doorbell?
טלפון. כל המיינדפולנס בלז, בבקשה לכבות. זה מפריע.
So at the time of the Buddha, there were many philosophers and yogis, meditators in India. And each one, there was a lot of freedom of religion, freedom of expression. Anybody could, come up with their own religion, their own philosophy, their own kind of practice, and do it, and practice it themselves and teach it to others and so on. So there were lots and lots of these philosophers. And they weren't just philosophers. One of my teachers explained that at least some of these people were yogis, meditators. And they really did a lot of meditation practice. And in their meditation, they achieved some very high levels of concentration, samadhi. And when your mind achieves samadhi, concentration, it becomes more and more clear, and you're able to see more things. So some of these yogis, through their concentration, were able to see their past lives. They could remember many past lives. They could also see into the future. And they could also see karma, how karma works. Okay, in a previous life, I did this action, and because of that, now in this life, I'm experiencing this result. So they were able to see this directly with their minds due to the power of concentration. So they had that experience, and then they wondered, so what is the self? What is the self? Like this person that we are now obviously is going to die one day, right? And our body will be cremated or buried or whatever. And then what? So they realized there is something that goes from life to life. something that continues from one life to another. It's not that, like scientific materialists believe, when our body dies, that's the end of everything. Right? This is what many people believe. When your body dies, you're finished. Nothing continues. There's nothing that continues after death. There were people who believed that at the time of Buddha as well. There were materialists. So that view was already around. But these other yogis, because of the power of their meditation, their concentration, they were able to see that, no, we don't just stop existing when we die. Something continues. So then they wondered, what is that thing that continues? It's obviously not the body. Okay, something else, some other part of us continues after we die. So that's how they came up with this idea of a permanent self. Permanent here meaning eternal, existing forever. It always was, it always will be. So it's eternal. And also it doesn't change. It's unchanging, always the same. And these other two qualities of unitary means it doesn't have parts. It can't be broken down into different parts. Just one whole thing. And then independent meaning not depending on causes and conditions. So it's not affected by anything else. It's like standalone, autonomous, existing on its own without having to depend on anything else. So this was an idea that was current, that was prevalent. I don't know how many people believed in it, but anyway, there were people who believed in it. They use the word Atman. Atman is the Hindu word which we usually translate as soul. So this was believed in by many people at the time of the Buddha, and they would teach it to their followers and so on. So it was a very common view, similar to nowadays. Many religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, believe in a soul. This is part of the belief system. We have a soul that is eternal, it will live after we die, and so on and so forth. So there are people, maybe not everybody in the world, but many people who believe in this kind of thing, a permanent, unitary, and independent self or soul. But what the Buddha found in his own meditation, and this is something he came to through practicing meditation, through looking into the nature of things, what he realized was there's no such thing. This is just a fantasy, a hallucination, a fabrication. Not true, not real. Okay, so now that's what the Buddha said, but we have to check it out for ourselves. The Buddha always said, don't just believe what I'm saying, but you investigate. Check for yourself if that's true or not. So this is something we have to investigate on our own. But let's just assume we have already done that. So we get rid of this one. Okay, so this is the permanent, unitary, independent self. So we've thrown that one away. We don't have that one anymore. Okay. But then we have another one. And this is number 2, coarse. So this is, it's still kind of coarse, or rough, gross, but not as much as that one. That was very coarse. So this is just coarse. Do you understand that word coarse?
No,
it's
that's
like
what I wanted to ask,
gas.
because now
as an opposite of subtle. Yeah? Okay. Okay, so the coarse one is the emptiness of a self-supporting, substantially existent self. Okay. Now, this kind of self is something we all have, according to Lama Tsongkhapa. Maybe not all Buddhist masters would agree with that, but Lama Tsongkhapa and his followers say that everybody has this view of a self. It's something inborn, innate. We're born with it. We don't learn it from our parents or our teachers at school. We are born with it. Why? Because we had it before. We had it in our past lives. So it's something we've been carrying with us life after life after life from beginningless time. So it's something innate, inborn, instinctive, you might say. And this terminology is maybe not something we're familiar with, but basically what it means is a kind of self that the way it appears in our experience is kind of like a boss or a director or a CEO. So it's the feeling like there's somebody in charge, an I who is in charge of my body and mind, my life. Okay? So you probably notice this sometimes, you know? The sense of an I who is running the show. This whole body-mind combination is like a business, okay? So there's a director, chairperson, I don't know what you call it, CEO, boss, king, boss, okay, boss. The boss of the business. So that's how it feels in our experience, okay? And it seems like it's not completely independent. Like the first one seems to be really independent of our body and mind, independent of everything, standing by itself. So this one doesn't seem that independent. That's why it's said to be only coarse and not very coarse. Just a little bit independent. So the analogy they give is if you have a group of people who are real estate agents, they're all working together selling real estate in an office, okay? So they're all doing the same kind of work, the same kind of job. But there's one person who's the boss of all the others, the head person, head guy, head lady, whatever. So that person is one of the group. It's not completely separate from the group. One of the group because they're doing the same work, but still in a little bit superior position, being able to give orders to the others. So they say it's that kind of relationship, the self, the sense of self in relation to our body and our mind, our aggregates. So that's how it seems to appear. So we feel as if there is such a self. Okay, we may not always be aware of it, but if we watch our mind, we watch our experience, we can start to notice that there is that feeling of a self. And probably most of us never question it. We just go along with it. We believe it's there, it's true, it's real. But Buddhism says we should investigate. Is it true? Does it really exist? Does such a self really exist? And what the Buddhism says is no, it doesn't. It's another hallucination, another fantasy, another creation of the mind. It's not really there. It's not really true. Okay, so we talked about this in the last session, and we did some meditation on it. That's probably not enough. I mean, this whole topic of emptiness and selflessness is really something you need to be looking at, learning about, thinking about, reading about, meditating on year after year after year for probably your whole life, if you really want to get it. It's not easy. It's not just like that we can get it. It's a long-term thing. And here we only have three Saturday afternoons, so it's very short. But anyway, it's a... Huh?
12 hours and we figure it out.
Right.
Easy.
But anyway, according to Buddhism, this kind of self doesn't exist. But again, it's something we have to investigate and check for ourselves if it's true or not.
Now when you say the word Buddhism, alternates.
All four these four schools of Buddhist tenets all agree that there's one exception. They say there's one, the first school is called the Bhashika, or the Great Exposition School. And that actually is just a name for 18 different sub-schools that kind of developed over time after the Buddha passed away. Probably most of them are extinct now. But anyway, it said that one of those 18 sub-schools believed in a self that they said it's neither permanent nor impermanent, neither substantial nor... It's just kind of inexpressible, something we can't really express. So the other Buddhist schools say, come on, you guys, what are you saying? They don't agree with that. So there is that...
Is it the sub-school of the Vibhashika?
Yeah, but whether they're still existing or not, we don't know. They might have gone extinct, along with the dinosaurs. No, after the dinosaurs. Anyway, so they say there was that kind of view, but all the rest of the Buddhist schools say, no, this type of self doesn't exist. It's false. wrong idea. Okay, so let's just assume we've realized that. So we get rid of that one.
That easily.
Goodbye. And now we have the next one. This is the tricky one. So again, you know, we have the little babushka inside. I mean, this isn't actually the smallest one, but just since we're such a big group. So let's just say this is the one that is the conventionally existing I, the I that does exist. Okay, it is true, it is real. But it's hidden, hidden underneath this other mistaken view, which we're going to start looking at now. So this is number 3, page 3. And this is said to be subtle. This is very subtle, meaning it's hard to even notice, hard to recognize. So this is the emptiness of an inherently existing self. So this view is only propounded or asserted by one school, which is, if you go back to page 1, on the bottom of page 1 you have all the different Buddhist schools. So on the left side are the Hinayana schools, on the right side are the Mahayana schools. So right down at the bottom is the Madhyamika Prasangika, the middle way consequentialists. So we didn't really go through all these schools. That's another whole subject, but we didn't have time. But one day, when you do the basic program, you can go through these schools.
Maybe this summer, we'll see.
Huh?
Maybe this summer, we'll see.
Yeah. So the Tibetans, most of the Tibetan schools, like in Tibet, we have 4 schools in Tibet. So don't get those mixed up. You know, there's these 4 schools which supposedly represent all Buddhists all over the world, or at least traditionally. But in Tibet, there are 4 schools, but this is just Tibet. And those 4 schools are the Nyingma, Kagyu, Sakya, and Gelug. Okay, so it's like 2 different sets of 4 schools, so don't mix them up. And the 4 schools of Tibetan Buddhism, as far as we know, I mean, this is what the Dalai Lama says, they all follow the Madhyamika Prasangika, the middle way consequentialist school. Okay, so that was the one that the Tibetans liked best. They felt that's the best one, that's the most correct. And it's only that school, the Madhyamika Prasangika school, that talks about this 3rd type of selflessness, the absence of an inherently existing self. Okay? So not all Buddhists would agree with this. In fact, many Buddhists would say, you guys are nihilistic. You guys are denying something that is true, that exists. What are you taking away from me? So they actually believe in inherent existence. Supposedly, anyway. So this term, inherently existing, I always had trouble with it. It didn't make much sense to me. But the meaning of it, the first bullet point under that, it says inherently existing means existing from its own side, independent of anything else, existing objectively. Okay, so these are some synonyms. There's actually a lot of different synonyms, other terms for inherent existence, but we don't have to go through all of them. But existing from its own side means it's there on its own. Independent. For me, the term independent helps most. Existing independently, meaning it doesn't depend on anything else for its existence. Able to stand on its own, exist on its own. Autonomous. And also existing objectively means it's not depending on our mind, not depending on our perception, what our mind is thinking and saying. It's, you know that term, objectively existing? Is that something that makes sense to you? I mean, a lot of these terms, it's not things we use in our daily language, right? When you're at the supermarket talking with your friends, you don't talk about these kind of terms, or at the golf club or whatever, you know. So it's sort of very special language, very special terminology that you probably, well, you might find it in Western philosophy as well, I don't know. But it's unique to, you know, philosophy, Buddhist philosophy. So we'll as we go along, hopefully this will become a little more clear what this means. And then the second bullet point says, this conception is innate. Innate means we're born with it. We come into the world already in the womb. The little baby in the womb already has a belief in an inherently existing self. I exist inherently. So it's not conceptual. I mean, it is. We do have conceptions, thinking that there's inherent existence, but it's not that we consciously, deliberately create these conceptions. They arise from within our mind, again, because of the past lives. According to Buddhism, we've had many, 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 many lives before this one, and in all those lives, we had this conception. I exist inherently. I am inherently existing. So, but it's kind of below the conscious level. It's not that we consciously, deliberately think this way. It's more instinctive, natural, intuitive. Does that make sense? No? So it is innate. Everybody, even, you know, babies and bugs, doggies and kitties, you know, Dexter believes he's inherently existing. Well, maybe he's a Buddha, I don't know. But however, it can also be acquired, meaning that it's also possible that we might, during our life, meet with some philosophical system or religious system that teaches this, you know, that actually reinforces this innate attitude and tells us you exist inherently. I mean, they may not use those words, they may use other words, but it could be further reinforced with teachings, with our education system. So it could be both, innate but also acquired intellectually. Another thing about this conception of inherent existence is that we have it not only with respect to ourself, our I, me, and other persons, but also with everything, all phenomena. So everything we see, everything we hear, everything we think about, all the objects we encounter, also they seem to exist this way inherently, and we automatically believe in it, buy into it. Does that make sense? So the other two conceptions I was talking about, the very course and the course, those exist only with regard to persons, I and others and so on, only with beings, not with phenomena. Whereas this one is with all things, all phenomena. And that is significant, but I'll explain later why, how. Okay. And so the process of understanding this kind of emptiness here meaning the lack of, the absence of that type of self. So in reality, that type of self doesn't exist. It's just, again, a mental fabrication, a mental creation. It's not really there, and yet our mind habitually believes in it and grasps at it. So what we need to do is realize the emptiness or the absence, the lack of that type of self. So the process of doing that, to realize that kind of emptiness, is we first have to get a glimpse of this sense of self. We have to look in our experience, observe our mind, observe our experiences, and try to catch sight of this sense of self that we have. And then, once we have that, then we use reasons. We have to go through a process of reasoning to prove to our mind that that kind of self doesn't exist. Even though it appears Seems to be there, seems to be very real, but in fact it doesn't. So it's not enough just to say to ourselves, oh, there's no inherently existing I. I don't believe in an inherently existing I, because Buddha said so. Buddha said it doesn't exist. So just saying that to ourselves, just thinking that to ourselves, you could sit there and meditate on that, 24 hours a day, but that will not get rid of this belief in an inherently existing self. Yeah. We have to prove to our mind, because our mind just, again, instinctively, intuitively keeps grasping at it, keeps believing in it. So we have to prove to our mind, make our mind convinced that that kind of self doesn't exist. It's not real, it's not true. So it's actually quite a long process. And it's something we have to do in meditation, not just study. Well, meditation, but first they say the process is first we need to study, we need to listen to teachings and develop a correct conceptual understanding or intellectual understanding of what emptiness means. And that itself isn't that easy. I mean, like in the monasteries in the Tibetan... Huh?
They debate all day long.
Yeah, well they spend 4 years studying just this topic. 4 years. And that doesn't mean like once a week. It means 6 days a week. 1 day off a week, 6 days a week, full time. They are going to classes, they are reading, memorizing. They memorize texts and they debate. They spend a lot of their time doing this kind of debate, which really sharpens your mind, really sharpens, the way of thinking. Really helps you to cut through misunderstandings, misconceptions. So they do that for 4 years. And even after that, they still say, I don't really understand emptiness. Some would say that. Maybe they're just being humble, but anyway, the point is, it's not easy. Did you have a question? Yeah.
Two comments. First of all, of course, I wasn't here in the last few sessions, so I have to be modest. Maybe you answered the question, but I still will ask. You started by saying, there is me. Don't worry, there is me. That's what you started with. What? Don't worry, there is me. There is I.
Yeah.
And then you move to negate. You don't say anything in positive. You explain to us what it is not.
Yeah.
In other words, you are taking certain layers. You explain to us that Buddhism says, don't worry, there is you, there is me, but it's not this, it's not this, it's not this.
Yes.
And now you are sending us to look for what? for understanding, for experience.
Yeah.
Because I have the feeling, maybe I'm wrong, probably, I don't know, but you're talking about not about a concept, you're not describing something. You're describing certain experience that maybe we'll have it, maybe we'll not. I mean,
yeah.
Can you say something on the positive, not what it is not?
That's a good question. No, it's a good question.
I'm
No, it's a good question. No, it is a good question. And there's...
Because
Huh?
Last week I asked the same question about what is it?
What is the self? Yeah. So, I can't talk about it. And in fact, some teachers, this is how they would start. They would start by explaining the I that does exist, the conventionally existing self or I. But the problem is, they say that we can't really understand or know or perceive the conventionally existing I until we get rid of all of these other layers.
why would I trust such a proposition?
Because it's hidden. That's why I think this is such a good analogy, because, we know that there's a little babushka right in the middle, a little doll right in the middle, but we can't see her until we remove the outside layers. You know what I'm saying?
We know because before that we saw that there is. But now talking about
I know.
we
I'm-
don't see. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, I'll answer your question. They say, again, this is according to the Madhyamika Prasangika, but other schools would explain differently. But no, actually, no. All the schools, all the Buddhist schools agree on one thing. They say that the self or I that does exist is what is imputed to our aggregates, our body and mind. Okay, so we have
מתויג.
named, labeled,
כל השם, כל
designated.
השם.
Yeah, yeah. So we have a body and a mind, that they exist, okay? So we do have a body, we do have a mind, and our body and mind in turn are also labeled. Our body is labeled on a collection of skin, blood, bones, cells, and so on and so forth. So we call this body. But still, we do have a body, our body does exist. And we also have a mind. All these, the stream of thoughts and emotions and memories and all these things going on in our mind. So those do exist. And the I, the self, the me, what is that? It is only named or labeled or imputed on top of the body and the mind. It doesn't exist as something that can be found, that can be pointed to within the body and mind. This is actually what I'm getting to the next point.
and it is not part of our awareness. Why do you differentiate between the two? Why everything about our awareness you accept that it exists?
Yeah,
And why suddenly the I doesn't exist?
because it's just an idea.
And all my conscience is not idea?
No. Consciousness, mind does exist. So the body is easy to understand. We can see our bodies, we can dissect a body and point out all the different parts of the body and how they work and so on and so forth. So that's easy to understand. Mind is not so easy to understand because we can't see it. We can't see it with our eyes. We can feel it. We can watch our mind. That's what we're doing in meditation. So according to Buddhism, the Buddhist explanation of the mind is it's this kind of like a river or a stream that's always changing. Each moment, different experiences coming, going. So it's like a stream of these experiences, not physical. None of them are physical, visible, tangible. It's just awareness. But it's changing all the time. So it's not, the mind isn't one thing, like we might have the idea of the mind being a kind of like a machine inside of us that's pumping out all these thoughts and memories and everything. So it's not like that. It's only the stream, always changing. Each moment a different thought or experience, coming, going. So that's the mind, that does exist. But then I or me or person, this is what we're trying to understand in this whole topic. What is the I? Is it something we can find in our body and mind? Can we point to some part of our body and say that is the I? Or can we point to some part of our mind and say that is the I? This is actually what we're exploring. But the answer, the Buddhist answer to that question is no. There is not something that we can point to anywhere in our body and mind and say that is the I, that is me.
And what is the conclusion from this? Does this lead to another stage or we stop here? I'm asking what is the proposition? What is the logic of assume you get to the consequence that there is no I?
Okay.
Is it the idea of being compassionate to the other people? This is the
That's part of it.
justification.
That's part of it. But the main thing, what the Buddha himself discovered, because he was trying to find a way to end suffering. Why do we suffer? Where does our suffering come from? So the Buddha looked at his own mind, really meditating 24 hours a day for years and years, and what he came to was, this is the cause of our suffering. Believing in an I, a me, a self that doesn't exist. Believing in a false idea of self, and then from there all these other attitudes come. I am the most important person in the universe. Everything revolves around me. I have to get my own way. I have to get rid of my enemies. So all of the attitudes, anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, all of these attitudes, all of these harmful behaviors, they all come from believing in an I, and that I that we believe in doesn't even exist. It's not even there. So once we can realize that, we have sort of pulled the rug out from under all of our other disturbing emotions, disturbing attitudes, negative karma, suffering, and so on and so forth. So once we've freed ourselves from that, we are free from suffering, then we can work with compassion and love to help others. So that's in a short answer. Does that make sense?
No, I understand. Thank you.
You say that the mind exists
Mind exists,
and
yeah.
the I don't.
Well, that
Both are
this.
abstract.
No, the mind is not abstract. Mind is not abstract. The mind does exist. It's not a physical thing. Mind is not something physical. We can put it under a microscope
Non-physical doesn't
and.
mean abstract. Non-physical doesn't mean abstract.
Yeah, what do we mean by abstract anyway?
Non-physical does not mean abstract.
Abstract, maybe she means something you can't really feel or touch.
Right.
Something that is
There is no form and they has no physical.
Because for me, abstract means it's just an idea.
No,
Just an idea.
no, I
But
mean,
mind is more than an idea. It does exist. And it can be very powerful. Mind can do amazing things. Can lead to nuclear war. It can lead to enlightenment. So,
Geshe Sona Rinchen, I asked Geshe Sona Rinchen the same question. So that doesn't exist, that one doesn't exist, nothing exists, so what does exist?
yeah,
So you used to say the following sentence, which I learned by heart through the years.
yeah,
Everything exists dependent upon a basis of attribution and the attributing mind and naming.
yeah.
Thought and naming, sorry, not the mind.
We're going to get to that kind of terminology. It's a little tricky terminology, so we're going to get to that. Yeah.
So only the Madhyamika Sangika believes that this self doesn't exist. The rest
No.
believe that the subtle self exists.
Okay. So. What I just said now about the self being imputed on the aggregates, that is something that all the Buddhists would agree with. But then when it comes to refining that explanation more, there would be differences. And we started this, well, just a little while ago, we started looking at this point number 3, the subtle kind of selflessness or emptiness of an inherently existing self. So that is something a bit more subtle than imputed. But I'm not sure if I'll be able to explain that. Let's see as we go along, if that makes sense. But yeah, so this third type of selflessness, the subtle one, is explained only by Madhyamika Prasangika. Should we have a break now? This is the normal time. Well, let's just do one more thing. I'll talk about this next point, and then after the break, we'll do a meditation on it. So, under the 3 bullet points, it says, one way of understanding how this wrong conception works, this is the wrong conception of a inherently existing I, is that it conceives that the self or the I is findable among the basis of imputation. So there's this terminology that Shuki just mentioned, and they use it in the in the Prasangika school. They talk about a basis of imputation and an imputed object. Again, this isn't sort of supermarket talk, golf club talk. Okay, so, oh, that doesn't work very well. That was the brown one. Try the blue. That's better. Okay, so there's this term basis of imputation. And imputed object. So I'm giving you these terms because they are used a lot in the teachings on emptiness, so it's better to get used to them. So let's just take an example. Let's say an imputed object like a chair. This is a pretty common example. So we have a chair here. So in the case of a chair, chair is the imputed object. And then the basis of imputation are the parts of the chair. So chair is made up of parts. This is easy to see if you go to IKEA and you buy a chair. That's a great example, right? Because you go to IKEA, you want to buy a chair, what do you get? You get this box, right? You come home and you dump all these parts on the floor. Is there a chair there? No, there's just parts and screws and a screwdriver. They're great, they give you everything. And then you have to put the parts together, and suddenly, at one point in time, now there's a chair, okay? So, so just to illustrate these terms, the parts of the chair are the basis of the imputation, and the imputed object is chair, meaning that we have all these parts, these different individual parts, and then on top of that we give the name chair. Chair is just named or labeled, huh?
We look at it and it appears to us as a chair, by the look of it as well.
No, I mean, the imputation, this process of imputation, isn't something we do with our eyes. It's something we do with our conceptual mind. It's conceptual mind, thinking mind that says, that's a chair. That is a chair. So it's not with our eyes. So in a similar way, if we take a person, so I'll just keep it simple. The person, let's say Dexter. Dexter is a person, okay? He's a person. So Dexter. Yeah. Okay, so Dexter is the imputed object, okay? And then the basis of imputation would be what? Well, we could say body and mind. Okay, Dexter's body and Dexter's mind. That's a simple way of saying it, or we could just say the aggregates.
5 aggregates.
Yeah, 5 aggregates. But this is a simple way, body and mind. So there's a body with, shaggy fur and tongue and tail and all these kind of things. And the mind, Dexter has mind, some thoughts going on in his mind. So that combination of body and mind, that's the basis of imputation. And then on top of that, we give the name or label Dexter or dog or whatever you want to call. Could be any kind of name, any kind of label. So then one way of understanding this kind of wrong conception of an inherently existing self or an I is it thinks that if we look among the basis of imputation, that is the parts of us, body and mind, we will be able to find something we can point to as I. Yeah? Somewhere in there. It's got to be there. It's got to be there. I just haven't found it yet, but it's there. Okay? That's the meaning. Or that's the kind of experience, the kind of feeling, the kind of way that this belief and... Huh?
I don't share it. I don't feel ever I thought that if I will look, I will find it in my toes or no.
This isn't a conscious thing. This is an intuitive, instinctive thing. We feel that somewhere inside of us there is a real I, a real me.
Yeah, I think in my brain. I mean, I think
Okay, then you think it's up here.
I have a feeling that he hurt me.
Yeah. So that feeling of he hurt me, that feeling of he hurt me, what is that me? What is the me?
My feeling of me.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. We have a feeling. We have an experience. There's a me somewhere.
Yeah, but it's not that it's dwelling somewhere.
Well, but where is it then? Is it outside of you?
No.
Okay, it's somewhere inside. Okay, so that's the point. The point is, we feel that it's there somewhere. Okay, so there's one meditation. Lama Zopa Rinpoche teaches this meditation, to just look for the I. Go through our body and mind, look for the I. So I thought we could do this meditation after the break. So you can refresh yourselves with coffee, tea, biscuits.